Spring practice, transfer portal, NFL draft, basketball. UW had a massive weekend.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor over with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies, and I am the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Lars, we are gassed. It was a massive weekend, truly, for Washington. So much going on between spring practice, the transfer portal, the NFL draft, which saw a record number of Huskies being taken in the modern draft era, and basketball got a whole bunch of recruits too. So let's start with football, where we watched a little bit of spring practice, but the biggest news that came out of all that, as you know, Jedd Fisch had a little bit of a laid back scrimmage. I want to say, is the transfer portal, where I feel the biggest place to start is Dermaricus Davis, one of Washington's two true freshmen, early enrollees at the quarterback position, has hit the portal.
Yeah, and it's one thing that I asked you, how long does he stay? And we both kind of assumed a year, right? Where, okay, might as well stay for a year. But the more that I thought about it, and I wrote about this on Athlon, where Dermaricus was in a tough spot, because when you come in with two, that's the thing that people are missing here. Because I was asked a couple of times about this on Twitter, where, if a freshman doesn't start, does that mean they're automatically transferring? Well, yes and no. When you have two, one of them is going to transfer. So no matter what, you were never going to be able to keep both of them for more than a year. And the longer you think about it, the more you look at the situation. It was better for Dermaricus because he wasn't getting a ton of reps, especially with Damon just clicking so well with the offense, and Will Rogers obviously taking the other first-team reps, where he's only getting maybe one out of every 3 or 4 scrimmage drives, right? That's nowhere near enough for him to develop. Now, could he just have redshirted? Sure. But then he's still going to come in and compete with Damon, who will probably have some games under his belt coming into 2025. And if you're Dermaricus, just go start somewhere else fresh, right? Where it's nothing against the new coaching staff, and it's not Dermaricus being an egomaniacal kid and saying, I want to start or whatever. But for his development, short and even long-term, it really makes sense to stay at Washington, knowing you also have Dash Beerley coming in the 25 class. So, and maybe they take another, again, I don't think they'll take another portal quarterback with him.
I think they will.
No, I'm saying they wouldn't have taken one with him on the roster, but now they will because of that spot, that difference. And I think that's what you want in the quarterback room, is have a senior or a junior, an upperclassman that you know is going to start, a kind of either young freshman that you are expecting to be the future of your program, and then a middle tier guy to where just in case it's got a veteran backup, maybe a JUCO guy in the room to bridge that gap from an experience standpoint. But yeah, it was pretty clear that Will and Damon was two guys that were 1 and 2 probably for this year, certainly, but then Damon certainly seemed like he's going to be the guy moving forward. So it didn't really make sense for Dermaricus to stick around.
So I absolutely agree with where you're coming from there. And I mean this in the nicest possible way. Dermaricus Davis was not going to play here, barring an injury in front of him. And I think Dermaricus has all the potential in the world, but from everything that you and I have seen through the first 3.5 we're through 4 weeks now of spring practice, Damon Williams is going to be the guy moving forward. And that was kind of already clear. And I think Dermaricus saw that as well and acknowledged that, where the more you and I watched him, the more you and I said, we see, XYZ. We like his potential. We like what he's doing. We like his arm strength. We like all these different things. But then we watched Damon, and Damon was just head and shoulders ahead of him, where we just look at their development from where it was, not even, coming into spring practice, but just since spring practice has gone through, where Dermaricus has very clearly made strides in a couple of different areas, but it's just, he wasn't as far along as Damon was already. And it's not that the coaching staff was prioritizing one over the other, but just the more you watch Damon, the more you could see that it didn't take him as long to adjust to the college game and to just everything that was being thrown at him through the first 4 weeks of spring practice. So it's not necessarily a surprise. And another thing that, isn't necessarily a surprise considering what some people have been, let's just say that they've been complaining about it on social media, is former Arizona 4-star signee Jordan Washington hit the transfer portal, one of Arizona's 2 signees at running back in the 2024 class, along with Adam Muhammad, has hit the transfer portal. And he was, he was hitting at some things on Twitter over the weekend. Tweeted out the purple umbrella emoji with the rain, purple rain, shout out. And it seems like, nothing has been decided, but it seems like he's very interested in coming to Washington and joining Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff.
Right, exactly. And that's one thing where at the time you think about it, when you look at Washington's running back room, there's a lot of bodies in there, but as we've discussed, both on the show and off the show, there's probably going to be some attrition in that room. So when you look at what Jordan Washington can do, a 4-star out of Long Beach, Jordan, clearly Scotty Graham, as you and I both know, have seen firsthand, knows how to develop some running backs and knows how to assess running back talent. I think is the more important thing. And when you look at Adam Muhammad, what we've seen, clearly, no doubt, Scotty Graham knew what he was doing, getting him out of Apollo, as you asked him appropriately after Thursday's practice or Wednesday or Thursday's practice. Great quote.
It's over on Huskies Wire for anybody who wants to read that.
I swear, I need to also post a video of Mike Farrell asking Scotty Graham if he feels old, because even though he didn't say those words exactly, anyways, long story short, Jordan Washington,
he's got personality.
He's got personality, but also he's clearly knows how to identify talent. So I think that's why when you get the combination of Jordan Washington, who can do a little bit different things than Adam Muhammad, and Adam Muhammad in that class, knowing you're probably going to lose, let's just say, guaranteed 1 running back, possibly 2. And you also already saw Will Nixon transfer out before the spring practices started. So when you look at that room, that's why you can start to add some guys in that room, because, it seems like it's a log jam now, but it's really probably not going to be long term.
So I have a bit of a bold take when it comes to if Jordan Washington does decide to commit to UW. I have a bold comparison for him that I know is going to be a little bit, out there considering what his production was and everything. But my comp is Savon Ahmed, where when I see him, the first thing that stands out as everybody on Twitter has so kindly noted is his 100-meter dash time of 10.24. That kid can fly. So it's something where, as you said, Lars, he has a little bit of a different skill set. He's a little bit better outside the tackles, where Adam Muhammad, when you look at that guy right now, you can see him doing those same things outside the tackles, but he doesn't necessarily have that same speed. That's no knock on Adam Muhammad, who's a really, really good athlete, but he's just not as fast, and that's okay. That happens. But I think Savon could be somebody not Savon, but Jordan Washington, moving forward, could have that same kind of 1-2 punch with him, where, it's just a little bit of a different skill set where both those guys can complement each other very well. And then the more you look at it, the more you see why Scotty Graham and Jedd Fisch and now Washington staff were so high on both those guys when they were down there at Arizona. And Lars, with that being said, it was a huge weekend for the Huskies in the NFL draft as well, as we saw 10 guys get taken. And we got to give a shout out to our good friends over at Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much more to get. You can get unique stickers. You can trade with friends to complement albums for big prizes. You get cool new playing pieces to travel to the boards with, and you get hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something new to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on the App Store or Google Play. Game on. Lars, we had a fantastic live show that we did after the draft on Thursday to kind of wrap everything that happened in the first round, where we saw 3 Huskies get taken for just the second time in school history. The first one being in 2015 when there was Danny Shelton, Marcus Peters, and Shaq Thompson. And, it didn't stop there. And this is the whole point that, Camber and Ben came on that we all discussed was this is fantastic for exactly what Washington wants to sell. And that's the NFL, to come be developed, come do all that. Where the Huskies, my hot take from a few months ago didn't come true, even though my Atlanta Falcons one did. But we don't need to get into that. I'm just going to shout myself out for that one. But the Huskies didn't have the most players taken in the draft, but they were one of 4 teams to get into double digits, which was really, really fun to see. And there were some really great fits. We're going to talk some more about that a little bit later on in the week, like Ja'Lynn Polk, Jalen McMillan, Braylon Trice. I think Edifon Ilfosio to the Bills is a great fit. But the way we want to talk about this is in terms of what it means for Washington moving forward, because not only do these guys cement their legacy at UW, but now if they go out and play really well in their first year or two in the NFL, like, for example, Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams, feels like that's just a shoe-in combination to be one of the best in the NFL for years to come. But as Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff are able to point to that and just say, yeah, we didn't develop these guys, which he did a really good job of doing, of just saying, yeah, these weren't guys that we developed, but they're from Washington. And it's that saying that he's got where it's all about the W. It all comes back to Washington at the end of the day. And this could be a fantastic piece for him on the recruiting trail.
Exactly. And now it's worth caveating that, again, Jedd Fisch did not recruit or coach any of these guys moving forward. But it's still the principle of the Washington football program, right? Where that's why you hire a guy like Jedd Fisch who wants to keep that mindset, right? Where he doesn't change everything around and say, oh, now we're going to develop guys this and that. It's like, no, you're already coming into an institution that is known for developing players. You just have to build on that, and Jedd Fisch is the perfect guy to do that. But to your point, yes, this is exactly kind of what we expected. And honestly, a way to spin it for Jedd Fisch as well is when he has success, let's say in 25, 20, separate from 24, but 25, 26, and 27 with some of these younger guys that he's bringing in the 24 and 25 class, he can say, hey, that class in 24 that decided to run it back ended up paying off and winning a national and playing for a national championship. That's how you can bring guys back and sell them on that extra development piece where, hey, yeah, you could be a 3rd or 4th round pick this year, but why not come back and be a 1st or 2nd round pick? You saw how some of these other guys at Washington did that. You can do that too. Yeah, it was a different coaching staff, but it shows out of school like Washington when now you're headed to the Big Ten Conference, so you're going to have more attention, where we saw Matt Castle, Nicole Auerbach, and a bunch of the NBC folks come out to practice last week. Yeah, you're getting national media attention, whereas in the Pac-12, you were kind of hoping for some strays to be caught, where now it's you're going to be marketed more, you're going to be known more, you're going to be on more televisions. And that doesn't necessarily mean, oh, NFL GMs are now going to see you more, because they were already being seen, but it's more from a mentioning standpoint. A Troy Fautano doesn't have to be a riser over the last 3 or 4 months of the process. He can come in after the season and be like, hey, yeah, he's probably the top 2 or 3 tackles or the offensive lineman in this class. Obviously, Joe L was the cream of the crop, but the more you look at it, there's different ways that Jedd Fisch can sell this, and all of them end up boding well for Washington.
Absolutely. And that, because again, that's what it's all about at the end of the day, where the future of Michael Penix, the future of Rome Odunze, if they play well, it's going to reflect very, very well on Washington. But even if, Michael Penix has to sit for 2 or 3 years in the very interesting scenario he finds himself in Atlanta, it's just, it'll all come back to Washington. And if these guys have success, you can point to Michael Penix and you can say, yeah, that guy was developed at the University of Washington. Or, you look at Vita Vea, you look at Budda Baker, you look at Shaq Thompson, some of these guys who have gone out there, and Jedd Fisch has done a good job of marketing them over the last couple of weeks with his whole Be a Pro thing. That's what it all comes back to, where those were guys that developed under Chris Peterson. But you can point to them and just say, it's all about Washington, where a coach doesn't necessarily define what UW is. It's the institution. It's everything else on top of that defines, what it means to be at Washington. And one thing that I really like is just the way the NFL in particular has marketed Rome Odunze, where I feel that he is one of the best ambassadors for the UW program as a whole, where I know Mike Varell put a tweet out there just saying, I've never covered a more polished human being than Rome Odunze is. I know you and I both echo that sentiment, and we've both been very vocal about that whenever we get the chance. And the cool thing is you could say the same thing about a lot of those guys that got drafted, where I'm truly, I do mean everybody, but Rome is just kind of on a different level in that sense, where they're all extremely polished, extremely exceptional human beings. But Rome was kind of on a different level of all that. And that's somebody where, I think you and I both assume that he's going to have a lot of success at the NFL level, but that's somebody where, if he resets the wide receiver market in 3-4 years when he gets a second contract, that's going to reflect really, really well on the program. And with all the receivers that Kevin Cummings wants to bring in terms of official visits that we're going to see, the commitment from Wade and Vinesbright, these are all things that can just continue to reflect on Washington 3 and 4 years down the line.
Right. And to your point, if you think about Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, Ja'Lynn Polk going in the first 2 days of the draft, obviously Rome being a first-round pick, and you're Kevin Cummings and you bring in Jeremiah Hunter, who has had good production at Cal. Now you're thinking, well, how can I make you that next Ja'Lynn Polk, right? How can I be the next Rome Odunze? How can I be even though Kevin Cummings didn't coach him and didn't recruit him, again, Kevin Cummings even acknowledged to us where, yeah, I know some of these guys, whether I signed them or not, I still recruited them. So I still have some level of a relationship with them. And that's, again, the tie-in between the institution and the relationship. That's kind of what college football is about, right? Where you combine the institution and the relationships. That's what it's about. And I'm glad you mentioned Shaq Thompson and Vita Vea, because those are two people who are going to be two former players who recruited by Steve, or one was recruited by Steve Sarkisian, stayed on and Chris Peterson. But in the Vita Vea, obviously, solely a Chris Peterson take, are coming back for Jedd Fisch spring game. Shaq Thompson hasn't been back to Washington, I want to say, since like 2016, 17, 18, somewhere in that ballpark range. So it's, again, not something where the institution defines everything else, right? Where Jedd Fisch is bringing these guys back in the program, similar to how Kalen DeBoer brought Marcus Peters back, right? Different coaches can bring different guys back. Danny Shelton was another one that came back under Jedd Fisch. And so just because some of these coaches never coached him or even recruited him, there's still those relationships with the institution that you tie together. And that's how you market it for Washington. Because, again, I remember when Jordan, and this will be a great reference now, when Jordan Paopao was at Arizona, after he left Washington, Arizona put out this recruiting graphic saying, oh, look at all these tight ends that Jordan Paopao has developed. And I'm like, all but one are from Washington. Now, like, again, that doesn't take away from the overall point of, hey, this guy is now our institution. But it is kind of, again, it's that caveat, right? Where you have all these players that go to different schools, but who truly is tied in? I think that's where the relationship piece also comes with it, where Jedd Fisch clearly has those relationships that, certain other previous Washington coaches, let's just call a spade, did not. And so when you compare that with what he's trying to sell, it's a perfect fit for Jedd at Washington to continue this train, because now you have a quarterback in the first round, a lineman in the first round, and a wide receiver in the first round. Now you can sell that to Damon, to Will, and to other future receivers, cornerbacks, and linemen, saying, hey, we want to have one guy every year go in the first day or two of the draft. You can continue that tradition on. You can't have that without having the foundation laid this past season.
And I saw the stat out there on Twitter as well that there's been no school on the West Coast with more first and second round picks over the last, I think it was 10 years, than Washington, which is just another thing that adds to the point that we're trying to make, is at the end of the day, that's what it all comes back to. It all comes back to the institution. And just seeing that a lot of these guys have had success, whether you look at Byron Murphy, whether you look at Budda Baker, Shaq, Vita Vea, all these guys were, of course, some guys didn't pan out, and the John Rosses of the world. And that's something that happens. That's just part of the NFL. That's part of football. So it's all about making sure that you can get to the next level and get that for what some of these guys is life-changing money. Or just not for some of these guys, for all these guys is life-changing money. But for some of them getting that second contract, that's what it's about selling. Where it's just, if you continue to push it, it should pay off at some point down the road. And with the way that Jedd Fisch is recruiting and getting bodies in the door for official visits in the class of 2025, feels like it might be sooner rather than later. And speaking of recruiting, Lars, basketball has been doing really, really well on the recruiting trail. But first, we got to give a shout out to our good friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And I got to say it real quick because I got to give a shout out to the Celtics. Up 2-1 in the series, the official team of Locked On Huskies. I'm still betting on them to get all the way to the NBA Finals. And we also got to give a shout out to our good friends over at Game Time, because Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, which is a great sign for both you and me, Lars, as we love spending summer afternoons, summer evenings at a baseball game. So we're going to make sure we use the Game Time app for all of them, because Game Time is so cool. It's got last minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. They got flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And they're all in pricing, where if you toggle the feature, it shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets at the Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Lars, Danny Sprinkle's been doing a really, really good job. It took him a little while to, get that first commit and get the ball rolling. But now he is up to, it's 5. Yeah. I want to make sure, because Zoom Diallo, technically is a recommitment, but he never officially decommitted. So there's 5 of them now, and he's done a really good job of recruiting the backcourt. Still want to see do a little bit of work in the front court. We'll see what happens with Great Osabor, Mountain West Player of the Year. But for all the guys he's gotten in the door so far, it's looking really, really promising.
Exactly. And that's one thing where, to your point, you mentioned it was a slow start, right? That's okay if you get the right guys, right? That's, I think, something to keep in mind, both in the college football and basketball portal, where there's so many guys in the portal. You could just theoretically take, X number of guys and say, hey, you know what, we like these guys, they're easy takes or whatever. Danny Sprinkle is clearly targeting specific players for his system, right? Where you look at keeping Zoom Diallo obviously was massive. So that's just kind of its own separate thing. But then you get DJ Davis from Butler, Mickey Mason from Rice. You pair that with Jace Butler, a 4-star.
Yeah.
Well, no, then you pair that with Jace Butler, a 4-star guard from the Branson School. And that's, I think, that's what I like about this. And then you get the big commitment yesterday.
Casey Beckway.
Yeah. And that was, to me, the one that I was waiting for. Not because of who he is, but because of the position. Where did Washington struggle the most last season, to your point, in the front court? And the guards were not the issue last year. It was, again, every now and then you can have an off game and say, hey, Xavier could have done it. Sure, great. Yeah, Corey could have played more, all that stuff. Whatever. Hopkins is gone. The point being, you need to have depth in the front court beyond just 2 players, because when you had Frank Kepnon go down, and that's, again, a very quiet piece that I think is almost worth throwing in as a 6th commit, is Frank Kepnon has not answered the transfer portal. It sounds like he's going to stick around at Washington. That is massive for Danny Sprinkle. That's huge. Because literally and figuratively, because that at 6'11", 7'1", whatever he actually is. No, he's 6'11", I think 6'10", 6'11", somewhere in that ballpark. Braxton, I know, was 7'1". With Braxton Mia, the backup center, entering, you need that depth, you need that reassurance, where just in case if Frank goes down, you have a capable body there with Power 5 experience. And Braxton was a fine player, but there was just times where it was like a roller coaster where, hey, I can go up for an alley-oop and then I'm going to check out for 5 minutes. And I don't know why that was the case, but under Danny Sprinkle, you need to make sure that depth in the front court is there, because as much as I like Wilhelm Breitenbach and pulling up for threes and every now and then and looking like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and all that stuff, Kareem, not Kareem, Kareem, just to clear, where you can play him in minutes at the 5 or the 4, but if you're counting on him as your 5, that was just not pretty in any slight. So that's why getting these big bodies is important, and also getting a couple more besides Grant Osabor potentially.
So I want to start with Frank there, because I got a lot to say. I want to say, especially about Zoom Diallo, but I have a hot take, and I think that Frank Kepnang was my favorite player to watch on the team last season. I think he's so much fun. He plays with so much energy at both ends of the floor. And especially for a guy that's as big and as strong as he is, watching that intensity on the defensive end that he has. And then, he's not necessarily the most reliable offensive player, but if you give him the ball down low, he's going to find a way to do good things with the ball in his hands. So I love watching him so much, but Zoom Diallo is certainly the most important one that we got to spend a minute on here, because I think Jace Butler is going to be a fantastic player as well. But when you look at Zoom, I feel that he's the piece that ties us all together. Or DJ Davis is going to be an awesome, reliable scorer. He can do so much with the ball in his hands. He can shoot threes, which is something we've seen just be on and off with this roster over the last couple of seasons. I think Makai Mason's going to be a fun scorer to watch as well. But when you look at Zoom, he's the true playmaker. He's the true floor general, where, his jumper isn't all the way there yet. I really like what he can do, but the more I watch him, the more I think he can be the guy where it's a lot like what Sahvir Wheeler was last season. I don't think he's as elite yet, because he's still a really, really fun, high ceiling player to watch, but he's that kind of guy that can just tie Danny Sprinkle's offense together and be that floor general that they need.
Exactly. And I think the one thing that separates Zoom, and again, because I know you're not comparing the necessary game to game, but
certainly not. Yeah.
But I was going to say, being 6'4", that also allows, that's why he's listed as a combo guard, right? Because he's natural with the ball in his hands, but he can play off ball and on ball. And so I think his usage in the system will be very intriguing to me, because do you play him with the one or the two, and which one is he stronger at? Do you have, and that's why it provides flexibility, right? Where you can have Davis start at the one and Zoom start at the two, and bring Chase Butler off the bench or bring Mason off the whatever you. But the point is, it now provides flexibility where you're not just relying on Zoom to say, "Hey, figure it out," a la Markelle Fultz, right? Where okay, you have a great 5-star, 4-star talent, but no help around it. I think that's kind of the key piece for Zoom, where he can, to your point, create a lot for his own. But when you get into the Big Ten and you get into those dog days in January and February, you need those second, third, and fourth scorers. And clearly Danny Sprinkle understands how to build a basketball program from the bottom up and top down to provide for that flexibility, to have multiple scorers, with different range, where Mackey Mason, more of a mid-range guy, can shoot the three, but Jace Butler seems like a guy who may be more comfortable with the three than anything else. But again, having all those different types, similar to when you're on the football field, when we talked about the running backs. So, hey, you want 3 different types of running backs because they all can do different things. That's why you want to have 3 different types of guards, to where you don't, let's say one goes down. Oh, now we have 2 off-ball guards and nobody that can naturally handle the ball. That's why you want different types of players on the roster.
Absolutely. And that's where, we mentioned Great Osabor a minute ago. That's why finding a way to get him to follow Danny Sprinkle, where he's certainly getting some big time offers from some big time programs. I'm sure UConn, probably Arkansas now with Calipari there. Some of the bigger schools around the country are taking a look and trying everything they can to get him in the door. And finding a way to keep him with Danny Sprinkle is going to be so incredibly important, where he's kind of the piece that ties us all together, because a front court of him and Frank Kepnang and Wilhelm Breidenbach and Casey Beckway in reserve is really, really nice. And then, you can find a way to add another depth piece or two there, where I feel like that was something that some of these Mike Hopkins teams have lacked over the last couple of seasons, where they lacked a lot of things. But I think one of the things they lacked more often than anything else is 3-point shooting and reliable pieces down low, where there were guys that would make some plays down low every now and again, but it never felt insanely consistent. I felt that, Braxton Mia did a really good job of developing over his time at UW, but he was never necessarily the overly consistent piece that you could rely on game in and game out to, give you 8 and 12 or whatever it might be. I know that's, an extreme example, but he never felt like that was going to be a full-time role for him, where Great Osabor is that guy who can come in and average 18 and 7 or something like that, and just be really, really reliable on both sides of the ball and tie this entire roster together, where he's never really looked overmatched. Even though he's playing in the Mountain West, I think that he was one of the better players that we saw just throughout the country last season, truly. And taking that extra step up to the Power 5 level is going to be really, really nice for him. You would just hope, for Danny Sprinkle's sake, that it's with Washington.
Yeah, and I think the one thing to also keep in mind with your point about Hopkins is when they would have shooters, but it would be like one or two, right? Where Moses Wood was the 3-point shooter last year. Cole Bajma was the 3-point shooter before then. Obviously, Keon could pull up and things like that, and Corin obviously could as well. But it really only seemed like it was just, hey, you're our 3-point shooter. Just get him open, figure it out. Whereas, okay, well, that's fine. You can have a good 3-point shooter, but how about having a couple? And then you look to the bench, right? Whereas Anthony Holland could pull up for a 3 every now and then, but there was, to your point about Braxton, nowhere near consistent. So and I think that's the thing that Danny Sprinkle has proven and understood. He knows how to build consistent winners, not just one-offs where, hey, you know what, we're going to go all in on this year and get 4 or 5 guys in the portal and they're all going to be upperclassmen and we're going to try and make a run. That's not sustainable. That's why I like bringing in both Butler and Zoom Diallo, where one doesn't cancel out the other. You're not saying, hey, I had a relationship with Jace Butler. I'd rather take him and not try and put my effort into Zoom Diallo. No, he recognizes the talent of Zoom Diallo, knows exactly what he can bring, but also knows he needs a couple other guys with him that are younger to build the program for the long term. Because this isn't something where every single year you want to have to go to the portal to find 4, 5, 6 players, right? You want to be able to have a core nucleus of about 4 to 5 players, 5 to 6, maybe depending on positions and things like that. And then sprinkle in, no pun intended, a couple of transfers, upper level, lower level, whatever you want to call it, just to supplement the roster.
Absolutely. Where, if there's, and again, I know this is an extreme example, but if there's a great Osabor in the portal, great. Yeah, you can go try to make a run at that guy. Or if you need a supplemental guard where I feel like this might not necessarily be the best example, or a Nate Calmes, where he was a really nice high-level scorer at a lower level. You can say, all right, well, we like this guy. We can bring him in some bench depth and just kind of see what happens there. Those are always certainly acceptable, but that was one of the big flaws with the Hopkins teams, was it was always, all right, we need to build an entire new roster every year and try to bring it all together with all this chemistry and everything that just never seemed to come to fruition. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. And keep in mind, Washington spring game is this week, so we're going to have a whole lot of fun coverage surrounding that. Whole lot of other fun stuff coming for you this week throughout the rest of the offseason, because we're coming into the offseason for a lot of stuff, and we're still going to have a lot of fun here on Locked On Huskies, so make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day, so please make sure to like the video, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video, and if you've got any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, please feel free to leave a comment down below, and if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.